Democrats are laying out the conditions for working with the GOP on tax policy. In a letter, Democrats argued against tax cuts for the top 1%. They also say Republicans should not use reconciliation. This is Republican lawmakers say tax reform is a must. Watch.
We have to do it. A lot of this economic growth we're seeing now is because that expectation of tax reform is already built into the growth. They are anticipating it, and that's why it's growing. If it doesn't happen, we could see the reverse effect very quickly, and we'll be to blame. So we've got to get it done.
We will need to use reconciliation because we have been informed by a majority of the Democrats in a letter I just received today that most of the principles that would get the country growing again, they're not interested in addressing.
Joining us right now is the CEO of 32 Advisors, Fox News contributor Robert Wolf. Robert, good to see you.
Great to see you.
Thank
Hello,
you so much
everyone.
for joining us. Yeah, we're happy you're here. Robert, we just heard, obviously, Chuck Schumer say we want tax reform to be bipartisan, but we don't want taxes to go down for the top 1%. Robert, if you don't cut taxes for everybody, including the rich, then you're not for cutting taxes, because the rich pay all the taxes. How do you see it?
Well, first, I think we'd love to see it bipartisan. I think Senator McConnell said the right thing. It will probably be a reconciliation again. Incredibly disappointing that we can't figure out tax reform after not figuring out health care, but I guess that's where we are politically. I think tax reform is going to be difficult. I think we're going to see more of a tax cut. I think it's going to be across the board. My concern is actually we don't even get into the personal tax side, and it stays mainly at the corporate tax side, because I think that's the easiest to pass. With a reconciliation, you're not going to be able to increase any deficit, so it's going to be, I think, very difficult to find out where they're going to find revenues coming in. And so I think I think we're up for a long slog. I was listening to you earlier, Maria, you and Kevin and Dagan and Lanny talk about the timing of it. I kind of agree with you, Maria, that I don't think we'll see it in November. It will probably be, if at all, you know, I think around year end. And I'm not feeling too good about it because I think there's going to be a battle on the debt ceiling.
Oh, God.
And so I think it's going to shift everyone away from, unfortunately, discussing, you know, some real legislative agenda.
Robert, good morning. It's Kevin. I'm glad you brought up the revenue neutral and the deficit. The problem we have right now is the tax code is over 75,000 pages. It's convoluted and complex, and you have a cadre of lawyers and lobbyists who are going to protect their special interests. So I don't know how you can make it revenue neutral. And you were talking about tax cuts. What are some areas that the Democrats could capitulate on, and are they willing to bend in regards to talking with Republicans and trying to get it done? There are certain points that they're willing to work with the Republicans on, like whether it's going to be.
You know, when I was a Republican, no, on the Republican side, listen, there are some Democrats that are coming up in 18, like Manchin and Heidekamp and others, that absolutely are for not only tax reform, but are for working with the Republican Party. And I think right now you have the Republican Party that hasn't shown any of their cards with respect to what tax reform is going to be. And you have the Democratic Party that's saying no without even seeing what tax reform is going to be. So we're right now on, you know, just opposite sides. I do think it will start to slowly come together on at least corporate tax reform. Some of the things that I think the Democrats are willing to give in, I think they're going to wait to see what's cut. Certainly, I don't think they're going to give on Medicaid, Medicare, or Social Security. And then that leaves really a lot of the things that are pro-business, whether it's depreciation or capital investment or R&D. And there just are not that many things to get revenues from.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to be in a pretty difficult thing. I mean, Maria, you know, we've been speaking about this for about 8 years.
You're right.
On the need for corporate tax reform. And you know, you just can't find the loopholes that anyone will vote on. You know, we've been speaking about, let's do this. Let's put it at 20%, and let's have every senator vote up and down on loopholes, and we'll see where we end up. My guess is, unfortunately, everyone's going to vote for the loopholes that are important to them.
Of course.
And we're going to end up in the same place. I think it's time to take some tough decisions here. Well, and we have to figure that out. And I do think, sorry, go ahead, Maria.
The story in the Washington Post, rather, as Dagan noted earlier, is talking about the potential delay because it's the current budget that is set to expire in September unless Congress approves new funding. The Treasury says that the debt ceiling must be raised by September 29th. The Senate and House are only scheduled to be in session together for 12 days from now until the debt ceiling deadline. So that's the issue, Lanny.
Yeah. No, I mean, Robert, I guess the question is, first of all, how realistic is it that this gets done, certainly with a crowded agenda? The other issue that we haven't talked much about is sort of how do you harmonize the tax code when it comes to small businesses and big businesses, right? One of the challenges we have with our tax code now is that you've got a lot of people who are small businesses who file through the individual code. If that doesn't get touched, as you say, how do they harmonize those changes? How do they avoid the gaming that happens in the tax code already?
So it's interesting you say that, Lanny. For the last few years, people aren't even calling it corporate tax reform anymore. They call it business tax reform. And it's their way of trying to get a broader umbrella. The truth is, I think getting this legislative agenda passed this year is going to be incredibly difficult because you're going to be using kind of funny money with respect to modeling. They're going to have to use growth projections to get through a non-deficit reconciliation that I think none of us would agree with. There's some things we definitely don't agree on, but none of us are going to agree that GDP is going to 4, 5, 6% on some of the dates that they're using. So I think it's going to be incredibly difficult for this year. What we hope, I think, on the business side is let's get a clean debt ceiling passed immediately. And then we can talk about this legislative agenda that we have to come together on. It's amazing to me that we can't get tax reform done. It just doesn't make sense.
It's ridiculous.
The small business people are getting hurt the most, okay? And then the large companies, have so much money overseas that we could reinvest here.
Right.
It's both sides are just, putting their feet in cement, not willing to work together.
Politicians, all lawmakers should be banned from talking about the need to help small businesses, not Robert, because Robert's in the private sector.
They keep telling us the reasons why.
But stop talking about it. Again, to all the Republicans who left that employer mandate in place that really hurt smaller businesses, they've been talking about that for 7 years. They left it in place. That hurts people. And Robert, do you think anything, though, in terms of tax reform, needs to be permanent in order for businesses to step up and act on those tax code changes?
I do. I think we have to figure out what we're going to do with our business buildup overseas. I'm not for a tax holiday where they bring back the taxes and they do a dividend or a shareholder buyback. But I'm certainly for having a repatriation that makes sense where they actually put it in, we've talked about it, into an infrastructure fund. I mean, right now, having money sit overseas not being utilized, we're all kind of, moving our books around to make sure we understand what is the best way to arbitrage a system. And I think doesn't bode well for anything.
Yeah.
And I think right now we're in a situation where we're sitting on, trillions of dollars that we need for infrastructure, and we could be using it.
Well, that's where the common ground is. They both agree on that.